At Lincoln High School, nestled in a small town surrounded by rolling hills and quiet neighborhoods, life moved at a predictable pace. The hallways buzzed with the usual chatter of teenagers swapping stories about weekend plans or debating over homework assignments. Among them was Marcus Johnson, a sophomore who often blended into the background. He wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, he preferred the company of books and his own thoughts. His presence was steady but unassuming, like a tree standing quietly in a bustling park. Marcus wasn't invisible, though. Some kids noticed him, not because of anything extraordinary he did, but because of what they thought they knew about him. They saw his worn sneakers, the slightly faded backpack, and the way he always seemed to carry himself with quiet dignity. To many, these details painted a picture of someone ordinary, even forgettable. But those who looked closer might have caught glimpses of something deeper. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about his favorite novels, or how he lingered after class to ask thoughtful questions that no one else had considered. On this particular Tuesday, however, none of that mattered. What happened next would ripple through the school in ways no one could have anticipated. It all started with a request, one that seemed harmless enough at first but carried undertones Marcus couldn't ignore. Principal Rogers, a tall man with thinning gray hair and a habit of clearing his throat before speaking, called Marcus into his office just as the final bell rang. The summons came without explanation, leaving Marcus puzzled. As he made his way down the hallway, dodging clusters of students eager to escape the building, he wondered what he might have done wrong. Had he missed handing in an assignment? Was there some issue with his grades? The possibilities swirled in his mind, each more unsettling than the last. When Marcus arrived at the principal's office, he found the door slightly ajar. Inside, Principal Rogers sat behind his desk, shuffling papers with an air of distracted authority. "Come in, Marcus," he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. Marcus hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, closing the door softly behind him. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, a scent that somehow managed to feel both comforting and intimidating at the same time. "So," Principal Rogers began, leaning back in his chair and folding his hands across his stomach. "I'm sure you've heard about the upcoming assembly." Marcus nodded cautiously. Every year, the school held a talent showcase where students performed songs, skits, or other acts meant to entertain their peers. It was a tradition everyone looked forward to, though Marcus had never considered participating. He wasn't the type to seek attention, especially not in front of hundreds of people. "Well," the principal continued, his lips curling into a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're trying to get more students involved this time around. And I thought, since you're, well, let's just say good with your hands." He paused, chuckling lightly as if sharing an inside joke. Marcus stiffened in his seat, unsure where this was going. "I think it'd be funny if you played the piano during the assembly," Principal Rogers finished, his tone lighthearted but tinged with condescension. "Just for laughs. We can set it up like a surprise, no pressure, of course." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks as embarrassment washed over him. He understood immediately what the principal meant. It wasn't really about giving him an opportunity to shine. It was a joke, plain and simple, a jab disguised as encouragement. For a moment he considered arguing, explaining that he actually could play the piano, that he spent hours practicing whenever he could find the time. But something stopped him. Instead, he forced a tight smile and nodded politely. "Sure, Mr. Rogers," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil brewing inside him. "I'll think about it." Principal Rogers clapped his hands together, clearly pleased with himself. "Great. I'm glad you're on board. Trust me, the kids will love it." With that, he dismissed Marcus, already turning his attention back to the stack of papers on his desk. As Marcus walked out of the office, his mind raced. He replayed the conversation over and over, dissecting every word, every inflection. The principal hadn't meant any harm, he told himself. It was just a poorly thought-out comment, nothing more. But deep down he knew better. The remark stung because it reinforced everything Marcus had ever feared about how others saw him. As someone whose efforts didn't matter, whose dreams weren't worth taking seriously. By the time he reached the bus stop, anger had begun to replace the initial sting of humiliation. Why should he let someone else define his worth? Why should he shrink away from an opportunity simply because it had been offered in jest? The idea of playing the piano at the assembly still terrified him, but another emotion was starting to take root: determination. If Principal Rogers wanted a performance, Marcus decided, then he would give him one. Not for laughs, but to prove that he was capable of far more than anyone gave him credit for. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Marcus resolved to face the challenge head-on. He didn't need validation from anyone, least of all the principal. But if this was his chance to show the world who he truly was, he wasn't going to waste it. Little did he know, his decision would spark a chain reaction that would leave the entire school, and perhaps even himself, forever changed. That evening, Marcus walked home with his thoughts tangled like a knotted rope. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood. His backpack felt heavier than usual, weighed down not by textbooks, but by the words Principal Rogers had spoken earlier. Each step seemed to echo the principal's chuckle, replaying in Marcus's mind like a broken record. When he finally reached the small house he shared with his grandmother, Evelyn Carter, the familiar creak of the front door brought him some comfort. The scent of freshly baked cornbread greeted him as soon as he stepped inside. It was a smell that always reminded him of safety and love. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of stew on the stove. At 72, she moved slower than she used to, but her spirit remained unshaken, strong like an oak tree weathering decades of storms. "Marcus, is that you?" she called out, her voice warm and inviting. "Yes, Grandma," he replied, dropping his backpack by the door. He tried to sound casual, but something in his tone must have given him away, because Evelyn turned off the stove and looked at him with concern etched into her face. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with his problems. Evelyn had worked hard his entire life, cleaning houses, babysitting children, doing whatever it took to make sure he never went without. She deserved peace, not worry. But one look at her kind eyes, filled with wisdom and patience, made him realize he couldn't keep this to himself. He took a deep breath and told her everything: the principal's joke, the dismissive tone, the way it made him feel small and unseen. As he spoke, tears pricked the corners of his eyes, though he fought to hold them back. When he finished, silence filled the room for a moment. Then Evelyn sighed, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table and motioning for him to sit. "You know," she began, her voice calm but firm, "people are going to say things. They're going to judge you based on what they see, or worse, what they think they know. But here's the thing, Marcus, their opinions don't define you. Only you can do that." Her words landed like a gentle rain after a drought, soothing, yet powerful. Marcus nodded slowly, letting them sink in. Still, doubt lingered in his chest. "But what if they laugh at me, Grandma? What if I mess up?" Evelyn smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. Her touch was soft but steady, grounding him in the present. "Let me tell you something about laughter, Marcus. There are two kinds. One kind comes from cruelty. It's meant to hurt, to tear you down. But the other kind comes from awe, from seeing something so beautiful or unexpected that it takes your breath away. If you play that piano with all your heart, I promise you." The second kind of laughter is the one you'll hear. Her confidence in him was unwavering, a lifeline thrown into the sea of uncertainty swirling inside him. Marcus thought about the old keyboard tucked away in the corner of the living room. It wasn't much, a hand-me-down from a neighbor, but it had been enough. For years, he'd spent hours teaching himself how to play, starting with simple melodies and gradually working his way up to more complex pieces. Music had become his refuge, a place where he could escape the noise of the world and lose himself in something pure and timeless. "I don't know if I'm ready," Marcus admitted quietly. "What if I'm not good enough?" Evelyn leaned, back in her chair, studying him with a knowing gaze. Good enough for who? For that man at the school or for yourself? You've been practicing for years, Marcus. You've poured your soul into that music. Don't let anyone make you question its value, not even yourself. After dinner, Marcus wandered into the living room and sat down at the keyboard. Dust clung to its surface, evidence of how long it had been since he last played. He wiped it clean with his sleeve and placed his fingers on the keys, hesitating for just a moment before pressing down. The first notes rang out softly, tentative but clear. Slowly, he began to play, letting muscle memory guide him through a piece he'd learned months ago. The melody flowed like water, easing the tension in his shoulders and quieting the doubts in his mind. As he played, memories surfaced, late nights spent hunched over sheet music, the frustration of hitting wrong notes over and over until his fingers finally found the right ones, the joy of mastering a difficult passage. All those moments had shaped him, building not just his skill but his resilience. By the time he finished, his hands ached, but his heart felt lighter. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a new sense of purpose. He dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made him feel confident rather than invisible. Before heading to school, he stopped in the kitchen to grab an apple from the counter. Evelyn was already there, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. "You've got this," she said simply, giving him an encouraging nod. Those 3 words carried more weight than any pep talk ever could. With a small smile, Marcus headed out the door, ready to face whatever came his way. At school, whispers followed him down the hallways. News of his agreement to play the piano at the assembly had spread quickly, fueling curiosity and speculation. Some students snickered, convinced it would be awkward or embarrassing. Others watched him with raised eyebrows, wondering if he actually had any talent. Even teachers seemed intrigued, though most assumed it would be a light-hearted performance meant to entertain rather than impress. Principal Rogers spotted Marcus during lunch and gave him a thumbs up from across the cafeteria. "Looking forward to your big moment, son," he called out loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Marcus forced a polite smile, though his stomach churned with nerves. He knew the principal still saw this as a joke, but that only strengthened his resolve. This performance wouldn't just be for himself, it would also be a message to everyone who doubted him. By the end of the day, Marcus had made up his mind. He wouldn't just play any random tune. He would choose a piece that demanded attention, one that showcased his skill and left no room for mockery. That evening, after finishing his homework, he searched online for inspiration. His eyes landed on a video of a pianist performing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The hauntingly beautiful melody captivated him immediately. It was challenging, yes, but also deeply emotional, a perfect fit for what he wanted to convey. For the next several days, Marcus practiced relentlessly. He arrived home each afternoon and dove straight into rehearsing, sometimes forgetting to eat until Evelyn reminded him. His fingers blistered and cramped, but he pushed through the pain, determined to get every note right. The living room became his sanctuary, the keyboard his instrument of defiance. With each passing day, his confidence grew. He could feel the music becoming a part of him, flowing naturally from his heart to his fingertips. Finally, the day of the assembly arrived. Students filed into the auditorium, chatting excitedly and speculating about the performances. Backstage, Marcus paced nervously, his palms slick with sweat. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and glanced at the grand piano sitting center stage. It was far nicer than the keyboard at home, its polished surface gleaming under the spotlight. For a brief moment, fear threatened to creep in again. What if he froze? What if he stumbled? But then he remembered his grandmother's words. Only you can define yourself. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped onto the stage. The chatter in the auditorium faded into silence as all eyes turned to him. He walked to the piano, sat down and placed his hands on the keys. Closing his eyes, he let the first notes of Moonlight Sonata spill forth, filling the room with a sound so rich and evocative that it seemed to suspend time itself. No one spoke. No one moved. For 5 minutes, the entire school held its collective breath, transfixed by the music pouring from Marcus's fingertips. When the final chord resonated through the hall, the silence stretched for a beat longer before erupting into thunderous applause. Cheers and whistles filled the air, shaking the very walls of the auditorium. Marcus opened his eyes, blinking in disbelief at the standing ovation unfolding before him. Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of shame or doubt. They were tears of triumph. In that moment, Marcus realized something profound. He hadn't just proven himself to the school. He had proven himself to himself. And that was the greatest victory of all. The applause was deafening. It washed over Marcus like a tidal wave, pulling him into a moment he never thought he'd experience. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, not as the quiet boy who blended into the background, but as someone capable of greatness. His heart pounded in his chest and his hands trembled slightly as he stood up from the piano bench. The spotlight felt warm on his face, and for a moment, he wasn't sure what to do. Should he bow? Smile? Say something? But before he could decide, the crowd erupted again, louder this time. Students were clapping so hard their hands turned red, while teachers wiped away tears they hadn't expected to shed. Even Principal Rogers, seated near the front row, looked stunned. His mouth hung open slightly and his eyes darted around the room as if searching for some explanation for what had just happened. He hadn't anticipated this. No one had. As Marcus stepped off the stage, still trying to process everything, he was immediately surrounded by classmates who had barely acknowledged him before. "That was amazing," one girl gushed, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "How long have you been playing?" another asked, leaning in closer as if afraid to miss a word. A group of seniors patted him on the back, congratulating him like he was an old friend. For Marcus, it was surreal. Just days ago, these same people might have laughed at him or dismissed him without a second thought. Now they couldn't stop talking to him, asking questions and marveling at his talent. He tried to answer them politely, though his mind was racing. He didn't feel like the same person who had walked onto that stage just minutes earlier. Something inside him had shifted, and he knew he'd never go back to being invisible again. Backstage, teachers approached him too, offering praise and encouragement. Mrs. Peterson, his English teacher, hugged him tightly and said, "Marcus, I always knew you were special, but today you showed us all just how extraordinary you are." Her words caught him off guard, and he felt a lump rise in his throat. He managed a small smile and thanked her, though he wasn't sure he believed her entirely. Could people really see him differently now? Or would this moment fade once the excitement wore off? Meanwhile, Principal Rogers sat frozen in his seat, staring at the empty stage where Marcus had performed. His mind replayed the performance over and over. The haunting melody, the precision of each note, the way the entire audience had been captivated. He thought about his own role in this. Hadn't he called Marcus into his office just a week ago and suggested he play as a joke? At the time, it had seemed harmless, even funny. But now, looking back, he cringed at his own insensitivity. Rogers wasn't a bad man. He cared about his students and wanted them to succeed. But sometimes he let assumptions guide his decisions, assumptions based on appearances, stereotypes, or lazy thinking. He had assumed Marcus wouldn't take the request seriously, or that if he did, it would be awkward and amusing. Instead, Marcus had delivered a performance that left everyone speechless. It was humbling, and more than a little embarrassing. After the assembly ended, Rogers waited until the auditorium cleared out before approaching Marcus. The boy was gathering his things backstage, looking tired but content. When Rogers called his name, Marcus turned around, surprise flickering across his face. "Marcus," Rogers began, clearing his throat nervously. I need to talk to you for a moment." Marcus nodded, unsure what to expect. He followed the principal to a quiet corner of the hallway, where Rogers stopped and faced him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rogers sighed deeply and said, "I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus blinked, taken aback. Of all the things he had imagined hearing from Principal Rogers, an apology wasn't one of them. I shouldn't have said what I did when I asked you to play, Rogers continued, his voice low and sincere. It was wrong of me to make light of your abilities, especially since I didn't know anything about them. You proved me wrong today in the best possible way, and I'm sorry for underestimating you. Marcus stared at him, processing the apology. Part of him wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt Rogers's words had caused. But another part of him understood that apologies weren't easy, especially for someone in a position of authority. After a pause, he nodded slowly. Thank you, he said simply. I appreciate that. Rogers gave him a small, grateful smile. You've got a gift, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, not even me. And if there's anything I can do to support you, please don't hesitate to ask. With that, the principal turned and walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the hallway. He stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation settle over him. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase what had happened. But it was a start. Maybe people could change, or at least try to do better. That gave Marcus hope. Over the next few days, the buzz around Marcus's performance only grew louder. News of his incredible piano playing spread beyond Lincoln High, reaching parents, neighbors, and even local news outlets. Someone recorded a video of the performance on their phone and posted it online, where it quickly went viral. Comments poured in from strangers praising his skill and resilience. Some shared stories of their own struggles with being underestimated, thanking Marcus for inspiring them to keep going despite the odds. At school, Marcus became a kind of celebrity. Kids who had never paid attention to him before suddenly wanted to be his friend. They invited him to sit with them at lunch, asked to join him during recess, and even requested tips for starting their own musical journeys. Teachers treated him differently too, encouraging him to participate in class discussions and offering extra help whenever he needed it. It was overwhelming at times, but also rewarding. For the first time, Marcus felt like he belonged. One afternoon, as he walked home from school, he noticed a flyer taped to a lamppost outside his neighborhood. It advertised an upcoming community talent show, complete with bold letters urging residents to showcase your skills. An idea sparked in Marcus's mind. Why not perform again? This time it wouldn't be for validation or revenge. It would be for fun, for connection, and maybe even to inspire others the way he had been inspired. When he got home, he found Evelyn in the kitchen humming softly as she peeled potatoes for dinner. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "How was your day, baby?" she asked. "It was good," Marcus replied, setting his backpack down on the table. "Actually, Grandma, I wanted to talk to you about something." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What is it?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pulled the flyer out of his pocket and handed it to her. "There's a talent show happening next month. I was thinking, maybe I should sign up." Evelyn studied the flyer, her lips curving into a proud grin. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "You've got a gift, Marcus. Sharing it with the world isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about spreading joy and showing others what's possible." Her words resonated with him. He realized that playing the piano wasn't just about personal triumph. It was about creating moments of beauty and connection. Whether it was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata or a simple melody he composed himself, music had the power to bring people together. And maybe, just maybe, it could help others find their own courage. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into preparing for the talent show. He practiced every evening, experimenting with new pieces and refining his technique. Sometimes Evelyn would sit nearby, knitting or reading, offering gentle feedback when he asked for it. Other times she'd clap along, cheering him on as he played. Her unwavering support meant the world to him, grounding him when doubts crept. And on the night of the talent show, the community center was packed with families, friends, and curious onlookers. Marcus arrived early, his nerves tingling as he set up near the stage. When it was finally his turn to perform, He took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight. As his fingers danced across the keys, the room fell silent, just as it had at the school assembly. But this time it felt different. There was no pressure, no need to prove anything. He was simply sharing a piece of himself with the world, and that was enough. By the end of the performance, the audience erupted into cheers, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known was possible. In that moment, he understood that his journey wasn't just about overcoming adversity or earning recognition. It was about finding his voice and using it to make the world a little brighter, one note at a time. The community talent show marked a turning point for Marcus. It wasn't just another performance, it was the beginning of something bigger, something that would ripple through his life and touch others in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The applause from the audience that night lingered in his ears long after the event ended. People approached him afterward, shaking his hand and thanking him for sharing his music. Some shared stories about how his playing reminded them of loved ones or brought back memories of their own childhoods. Others admitted they had never heard classical music performed live before and were amazed by its beauty. One woman, an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Harper, pulled Marcus aside after the show. Her eyes sparkled with emotion as she spoke. "Young man," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "your music took me back to my youth. I used to play the piano myself, but arthritis stole that joy from me years ago. Watching you tonight made me feel like I hadn't lost it entirely." She patted his arm gently before walking away, leaving Marcus speechless. He realized then that his music wasn't just for himself. It had the power to connect people, to stir emotions, and to heal wounds he hadn't even known existed. Word of Marcus's talent continued to spread beyond the neighborhood. Local newspapers wrote articles about the quiet high school student who stunned audiences with his piano skills. One reporter described him as a hidden gem whose brilliance shone brightly when given the chance. Another piece highlighted how Marcus turned a cruel joke into a moment of triumph, calling him an inspiration to anyone who has ever been underestimated. At Lincoln High, things began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Teachers started encouraging students to pursue their passions, no matter how unconventional or unexpected. Mrs. Peterson, Marcus's English teacher, assigned a creative project where students could express themselves through art, poetry, or music. When a shy freshman girl played a short guitar solo during class presentations, the room erupted into applause, just like it had for Marcus. Even Principal Rogers seemed different. He became more mindful of his words and actions, making an effort to recognize each student's unique talents rather than relying on assumptions. For Marcus, life felt fuller than ever before. His newfound confidence spilled over into other areas of his life. In class, he raised his hand more often, offering thoughtful answers and asking insightful questions. During lunch breaks, he joined conversations instead of sitting quietly at the edges of groups. And in music club meetings, he took the lead, teaching younger students basic chords and encouraging them to practice regularly. Music had always been his escape, but now it was becoming a bridge, a way to bring people together. Despite all the attention, Marcus remained humble. He didn't seek praise or validation. Instead, he focused on using his gifts to make a difference. One day, while practicing at home, he had an idea. What if he organized a benefit concert to raise money for the school's music program? Lincoln High's arts budget had been cut repeatedly over the years, leaving instruments outdated and supplies scarce. A fundraiser could help provide new resources and opportunities for students who shared his love of music. Excited by the idea, Marcus pitched it to Evelyn that evening. She listened intently as he explained his plan, her face lighting up with pride. "That's a wonderful thought, Marcus," she said. "But organizing something like that won't be easy. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" "I think so," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in his chest. "It's not just about me anymore. If I can help other kids find their passion the way I found mine, it'll be worth it." With Evelyn's blessing, Marcus approached Mrs. Peterson and Principal Rogers with his proposal. Both were enthusiastic about the idea, and offered their support. Together they formed a planning committee, which included students, teachers, and parents. Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly alongside his classmates to organize the event. They designed flyers, reached out to local businesses for donations, and recruited volunteers to help set up on the big day. As the date of the benefit concert approached, excitement buzzed throughout the school. Students rehearsed their acts, fine-tuning every detail to ensure the performance would be memorable. Teachers rallied behind the cause, spreading the word to families and friends. Even Principal Rogers got involved, helping arrange chairs and test sound equipment. For the first time in years, the entire school felt united by a common goal. On the evening of the concert, the auditorium was packed. Parents, grandparents, siblings, and neighbors filled the seats, eager to see what the students had prepared. Backstage, Marcus paced nervously, his stomach flipping with anticipation. This wasn't just any performance, it was a culmination of everything he had worked toward. If successful, it would not only raise funds, but also inspire others to believe in themselves. When it was finally time to begin, Marcus stepped onto the stage to introduce the event. The spotlight felt warm on his skin, and the sea of faces staring back at him blurred together. Taking a deep breath, he spoke into the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice clear and strong. "This concert is about more than raising money for our music program. It's about showing that everyone has a gift, and that when we come together to support each other, amazing things can happen." The audience erupted into applause, cheering loudly before settling into silence as the first act took the stage. Throughout the evening, students performed a variety of pieces, from vocal solos to jazz band ensembles. Each act received thunderous applause, but none more so than Marcus's closing performance. Once again, he chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the same piece that had captivated the school during the assembly months earlier. As his fingers glided across the keys, the room fell silent, caught in the spell of his music. When the final note faded away, the audience leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering until their hands hurt. Tears streamed down some faces, while others simply sat in awe, unable to move. It was a moment of pure magic, one that transcended age, background, and circumstance. After the concert, the numbers came in. The event had raised over $5,000 for the school's music program. Instruments would be repaired, sheet music purchased, and scholarships created for students who couldn't afford lessons. But more importantly, the concert sparked a renewed interest in the arts. Enrollment in music classes surged, and students who had never considered joining the choir or band suddenly signed up, eager to explore their creativity. Principal Rogers stood at the front of the auditorium after the concert, addressing the crowd with uncharacteristic emotion. "Tonight we witnessed something extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with pride. "Marcus Johnson reminded us all of the importance of believing in ourselves and in each other. Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. Take a chance, step into the spotlight, and show the world what you're capable of." His words resonated deeply with those in attendance, especially Marcus. Hearing the principal speak with such sincerity reinforced how far they had both come since that fateful meeting in the office. What had started as a dismissive comment had transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for Marcus, but for the entire school. In the days that followed, Marcus reflected on everything that had happened. Life had changed dramatically in just a few short months. He had gone from being an overlooked sophomore to a role model for his peers. Strangers recognized him in the grocery store, thanking him for inspiring their children. Teachers treated him with respect and admiration, while classmates sought his advice and friendship. Yet despite all the accolades, Marcus knew the journey wasn't really about fame or recognition. It was about proving, to himself and to the world, that he mattered, that his dreams were valid, that his voice deserved to be heard. Evelyn noticed the shift in him too. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she placed a hand on his shoulder. You've grown so much these past few months, she said softly. I'm proud of you, Marcus. Not because of the concerts or the applause, but because you stayed true to yourself. That's the hardest thing to do in this world. Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Thanks, Grandma, he replied. I couldn't have done any of it without you. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and people who underestimated him. But Marcus had learned something invaluable. Resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about facing it head-on and emerging stronger on the other side. With music as his anchor and his grandmother's wisdom guiding him, he knew he could handle whatever came next. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the yard, Marcus felt a sense of peace. He had found his place in the world, not by conforming to others' expectations, but by embracing who he truly was. The boy who once blended into the background had become a beacon of hope, proving that even the quietest voices can make the loudest impact. The months that followed the benefit concert were transformative for Marcus, not just personally but also within the community. His name became synonymous with resilience and inspiration, a symbol of what could happen when someone refused to let negativity define them. People began to see him differently, not as the quiet boy who kept to himself, but as a leader, a role model, and a source of pride for Lincoln High School. At school, Marcus's influence continued to grow. The money raised from the concert allowed the music program to flourish in ways no one had imagined. New instruments arrived, their polished surfaces gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the band room. Sheet music filled shelves that had once been empty, offering students access to pieces they had only dreamed of playing. Scholarships were awarded to talented kids who couldn't afford lessons, giving them the chance to explore their potential without financial barriers. Marcus took an active role in mentoring these students. After school, he could often be found in the music room, patiently guiding younger players through tricky scales or helping them master complex rhythms. He never made them feel small for struggling. Instead, he encouraged them to keep trying, reminding them that mistakes were part of the process. Even the greatest musicians started somewhere, he would say with a smile. You'll get there if you stick with it. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as he worked with a freshman named Jamal on a piano duet, Mrs. Peterson walked in carrying a stack of papers. She paused in the doorway, watching silently as Marcus demonstrated a chord progression, and then handed the keyboard back to Jamal, urging him to try again. When Jamal finally hit the right notes, his face lit up with excitement and Marcus clapped enthusiastically. That was perfect, Marcus said, grinning. See, you've got this. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat, drawing their attention. Sorry to interrupt, she said, stepping into the room. But I wanted to tell you both how proud I am. Marcus, what you're doing here, it's making a real difference. Marcus shrugged modestly, though a hint of pride flickered in his eyes. I'm just helping out where I can, he replied. These kids have so much talent. They just need a little encouragement. Jamal nodded eagerly. He's right, Mrs. Peterson. Marcus makes me believe I can actually do this. Before, I thought playing the piano was something only smart people could do. But now, I don't know. It feels possible. Mrs. Peterson smiled warmly. That's exactly why we need people like you, Marcus. You're showing others that they're capable of more than they think. Keep it up. As the weeks passed, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere at school. Students seemed more confident, more willing to take risks. In art class, shy, freshmen painted bold murals on blank walls. During drama rehearsals, nervous sophomores delivered lines with newfound conviction. Even in sports, teammates pushed themselves harder, inspired by the idea that hard work and belief could lead to greatness. Principal Rogers played a role in this shift too. He held assemblies where he celebrated student achievements, big and small. Whether it was a science fair winner or a basketball player who improved their free throws, he made sure everyone felt seen and valued. During one such assembly, he called Marcus to the stage to speak about perseverance. Standing before the entire school, Marcus felt a mix of nerves and gratitude. He thought about everything he'd been through, the dismissive comments, the self-doubt, the moments of triumph. and realized how far he'd come. Looking out at the sea of faces, he spoke from the heart. "Sometimes life will throw challenges your way," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "People might doubt you, or maybe you'll doubt yourself, but remember this. You are stronger than you think. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. Believe in your dreams, even when they seem impossible. And most importantly, support each other. We're all better when we lift each other up." The auditorium erupted into applause, echoing off the walls like thunder. Marcus stepped down from the stage, feeling a sense of fulfillment that words couldn't fully capture. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. And in doing so, he was helping others thrive too. Outside of school, Marcus's reputation continued to grow. Local newspapers wrote follow-up stories about the impact of the benefit concert, highlighting how it had revitalized the arts program at Lincoln High. Community members praised him for his generosity and leadership, calling him a true hometown hero. Some even suggested he apply for scholarships to prestigious music schools, believing he had the talent to succeed on a larger stage. Evelyn, always his biggest cheerleader, encouraged him to dream bigger. "Why not aim high, Marcus?" she asked one evening as they sat together in the living room. "You've already proven you can achieve great things. Why stop now?" Marcus hesitated. The idea of leaving home, of stepping into an unfamiliar world felt daunting. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he failed? But Evelyn saw the hesitation in his eyes and leaned forward, placing a hand on his knee. "Baby, you've faced worse than fear. You've shown this town and yourself that you're capable of anything. Don't let doubt hold you back now. If music is your passion, chase it. I'll be right here cheering you on every step of the way." Her faith in him was unwavering, a constant source of strength. Slowly, Marcus began to consider the possibility. He researched music programs at colleges across the country, marveling at the opportunities available to him. He practiced harder than ever, determined to refine his skills and prepare for auditions. Each note he played carried a piece of his grandmother's wisdom, a reminder that he was worthy of chasing his dreams. By spring, Marcus had applied to several universities, including Juilliard, a school he had once thought was out of reach. Waiting for the responses was agonizing, but Evelyn kept him grounded. "No matter what happens," she told him, "you've already achieved so much. This is just the next chapter." When the acceptance letters started arriving, Marcus could hardly believe his eyes. One by one, schools praised his talent and offered scholarships to help him pursue his education. Then came the letter from Juilliard, a thick envelope bearing the school's crest. His hands trembled as he opened it, scanning the page until he found the words he had hoped for. "Congratulations, Marcus Johnson. We are delighted to offer you admission." Tears streamed down his face as he showed the letter to Evelyn. She hugged him tightly, laughing and crying at the same time. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "You've earned this, Marcus, every bit of it." Word of his acceptance spread quickly, bringing another wave of celebration to Lincoln High. Teachers cheered, students congratulated him in the hallways, and Principal Rogers announced the news during morning announcements. "Marcus Johnson has shown us all what determination and hard work can achieve," he said proudly. "Let's give him a round of applause." The applause echoed through the halls, a fitting send-off for a young man who had transformed not only his own life, but also the lives of those around him. As graduation approached, Marcus prepared for the next phase of his journey, knowing he carried the love and support of his community with him. On the day of the ceremony, Marcus stood on stage as valedictorian, addressing his classmates with heartfelt gratitude. "We've all faced challenges," he said, his voice ringing clear across the auditorium. "But today isn't about the obstacles we've overcome. It's about the futures we're building. Let's take what we've learned here and use it to make the world brighter, kinder, and more beautiful. Together, we can create something extraordinary." As confetti rained down and caps flew into the air, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. He had started this journey as a boy unsure of his place in the world. Now, he left as a young man ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. With music as his guide and resilience as his foundation, He knew he could face anything. And so, as the sun set on Lincoln High, casting golden light over the graduating class, Marcus looked toward the horizon, eager to write the next chapter of his story. Years passed, and Marcus's journey took him far from the small town where he had grown up. Juilliard was everything he had dreamed of, and more. The halls buzzed with energy, filled with students who shared his passion for music. Each day brought new challenges, pushing him to grow as a musician and as a person. He spent hours in practice rooms, perfecting every note, every movement of his fingers across the keys. His professors recognized his dedication and encouraged him to explore different styles, from classical to jazz to contemporary compositions. But despite the excitement of living in New York City and studying at one of the most prestigious music schools in the world, Marcus never forgot where he came from. On quiet evenings, when the city lights flickered outside his dorm window, he thought about Lincoln High, his grandmother Evelyn, and the piano tucked away in the corner of their living room. Those memories grounded him, reminding him why he had started this journey in the first place. During his junior year, Marcus received an invitation that made his heart swell with pride. Lincoln High School wanted him to return as the keynote speaker for their annual talent showcase, now renamed the Marcus Johnson Showcase. It was a gesture that meant more to him than any award or accolade ever could. For years he had been the boy sitting quietly in the audience watching others shine. Now, he was being celebrated as someone who had inspired countless others to find their own light. When Marcus arrived back in his hometown, it felt surreal. The streets looked smaller than he remembered, but the warmth of the people remained unchanged. As he walked through the doors of Lincoln High, he was greeted by familiar faces, teachers, classmates, and even Principal Rogers, who shook his hand warmly. "You've come a long way, Marcus," Rogers said, his voice filled with admiration. "We're proud of you." The night of the showcase arrived and the auditorium was packed. Students, parents, and alumni filled the seats, eager to hear what Marcus had to say. When he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly, as if welcoming home a hero. Marcus smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and nostalgia as he looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you all for having me here tonight," he began, his voice calm but powerful. "This school has given me so much. Opportunities, friendships, and lessons I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. But tonight, I want to talk about something bigger than me, bigger than any one person." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "When I was a sophomore, I stood on this same stage and played the piano, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to prove something, to myself, and maybe to others. At the time, I didn't realize how much that moment would change my life. But looking back, I see now that it wasn't just about me proving my worth. It was about showing everyone here that we all have gifts inside us, waiting to be discovered." He went on to share stories from his time at Juilliard, the late-night practice sessions, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that came from perseverance. He spoke about the importance of believing in oneself, even when the odds seemed impossible. And he reminded the audience that greatness wasn't reserved for a select few. It belonged to anyone willing to work for it. "When you leave this auditorium tonight," Marcus concluded, "I hope you remember one thing. Your dreams matter. No matter where you come from, no matter what challenges you face, you have the power to create something beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Keep playing your song, whatever it may be, and trust that the world will listen." As the final notes of his speech faded, the room erupted into thunderous applause. Students wiped away tears, teachers nodded in agreement, and Evelyn, seated near the front, beamed with pride. For Marcus, it was a full-circle moment, a chance to give back to the community that had shaped him. After the event, Marcus stayed in town for a few extra days, visiting old friends and spending time with Evelyn. They sat together on the porch, sipping lemonade and reminiscing about the past. "You've done so much, baby," Evelyn said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Your mama and daddy would be so proud of you." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Grandma." You taught me to believe in myself when no one else did. Evelyn chuckled softly. All I did was remind you of what was already inside you. The rest, that's all you. Before returning to Juilliard, Marcus made a promise to himself. He would continue using his platform to inspire others. Over the next few years, he performed at schools, community centers, and events across the country, sharing his story and encouraging young people to pursue their passions. He also launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing musical instruments and lessons to underserved communities. Through fundraisers, partnerships, and volunteer efforts, the program grew rapidly, reaching thousands of children who might otherwise have gone without access to music education. Graduation from Juilliard marked another milestone in Marcus's life. Standing alongside his classmates, he reflected on how far he had come. From the boy who once doubted his abilities to the man standing on stage receiving his diploma, he realized that every challenge, every setback, had led him to this moment. Afterward, he moved to Chicago, where he began teaching music while pursuing a career as a professional pianist. His performances captivated audiences, earning him critical acclaim and invitations to play at renowned venues around the world. Despite his success, Marcus remained humble, always remembering the lessons he had learned along the way. He often returned to Lincoln High, not just for special occasions but to check in on the students and teachers who had supported him. During one visit, he met a shy freshman named Mia, who reminded him so much of himself at that age. She loved music but lacked confidence, convinced she wasn't good enough to join the choir. Marcus spent hours working with her, encouraging her to sing despite her fears. By the end of the year, Mia had performed a solo at the showcase, bringing the audience to tears with her soulful voice. As the years turned into decades, Marcus's legacy only grew stronger. The Marcus Johnson Showcase became a beloved tradition at Lincoln High, inspiring generations of students to embrace their talents. Local businesses named scholarships after him, and murals depicting his likeness appeared on buildings throughout the town. Even Principal Rogers, now retired, attended events honoring Marcus, proudly telling anyone who would listen that he had known Marcus since he was just a quiet kid with a big heart. In interviews, Marcus often credited his grandmother for teaching him resilience and compassion. "She showed me that kindness and determination can move mountains," he said during one televised appearance. "If I've achieved anything worthwhile, it's because of her." Evelyn lived to see her grandson achieve his dreams, passing away peacefully at the age of 92. Her funeral was a celebration of her life, attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched, including many former students of Marcus's. In her honor, he composed a piece called Grandma's Lullaby, which he performed at concerts worldwide. The hauntingly beautiful melody captured her spirit perfectly, leaving audiences breathless. By the time Marcus reached his 50s, he was widely regarded as one of the greatest pianists of his generation. Yet he never lost sight of his roots. He continued mentoring young musicians, advocating for arts education, and using his platform to uplift those who felt unseen. His story served as a reminder that greatness could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes all it took was one moment of courage to change everything. On a crisp autumn evening, Marcus sat alone at a grand piano in a concert hall, preparing to perform Grandma's Lullaby once again. As he placed his hands on the keys, he closed his eyes and thought about the journey that had brought him here. From the principal's dismissive comment to the standing ovations, from the worn keyboard in his childhood home to the world's finest stages, every step had been part of a larger symphony, a melody shaped by love, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to shine. When the final note echoed through the hall, Marcus opened his eyes to find the audience on their feet, applauding with tears in their eyes. For a moment, he simply sat there, letting the sound of their cheers wash over him. Then, rising from the bench, he bowed deeply, knowing that his story was not just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever dared to dream. And as he left the stage, he whispered to himself, "Thank you, Grandma. We did it."